for the type of knowledge that you are talking about, for the type of intelligibility and truth and justification that you're talking about, all of that is from within your worldview. And to you, there are no other worldviews than yours and people who are fighting yours. But I don't hold that position.
That's fine.
I hold the position that every human being is flawed. Every human being has weaknesses. They fool themselves. They are capable of making mistakes and having false understanding. That doesn't mean that you aren't able to hold a true belief. That doesn't mean that you're not able of knowing what's true. That only means that you also have a margin for error in the fact that you are a flawed human being. Now, in your worldview, you also agree that every human being is flawed. Every human being has weaknesses and they are prone to mistakes, which is why you have the biblical God providing special revelation and the general revelation to overcome that.
But here's the problem, though.
Okay.
I can make sense of that claim. You can't. Because the thing is...
You can make sense of what claim?
I can make sense of the claim that everyone is flawed. I can make an absolute knowledge claim to the degree that everyone is flawed. But when you make that claim, you're coming from a perspective that is flawed. So my question is, how do you know anything? And this is how it goes. And we don't have to go down that line, but this is how it would go in a discussion if this was a debate. I say, how do you know anything to 0.0001% about the nature of humanity? And it would have to be a vicious circle of assuming the truth of what you do believe to conclude anything about any knowledge claim.
The operable, the functional level of knowledge is different from absolute perfect knowledge. And I would argue that having the absolute perfect knowledge is not necessarily relevant to a functional execution of living your life.
My claim is that, you say that you have a functional level of knowledge. And I get Christians that criticize me for that as well because they say I talk about certainty all the time. But that's not my argument. My argument is that not that we all have certainty about everything or even something along that line. I'm saying that you cannot, as an unbeliever, have knowledge to any degree without begging the question. And I'm all ears as to how a person can have knowledge to any degree. Forget certainty. Because you say a functional level of knowledge. I'm interested in knowing how people can have knowledge to 0.001% unless they appeal to God.
Okay. The problem is that the semantical issue of your worldview versus my worldview, you saying that there is this revelation from God, that is something that I can't comprehend. That just the fact that you are receiving the revelation, the claim that you're saying, I have received this, you have received this, everyone has received this, the reality of that statement is what I can't comprehend in the same way that you can't comprehend how I could have functional knowledge.
Yeah, but the thing is...
So I don't know if I can explain it to you any more than you can explain to me that you have revelation.
That's fair. Revelation. That's fair, but I'm willing to listen to the attempt.
What attempt?
The attempt to explain how you can have knowledge to 0.001%. Now you're saying that I want to understand it. That's fine.
Okay. All right. The 0.001% that you're talking about, I don't think that is relevant, right? We're not talking... That's just like an arbitrary number.
Well, that's right. How can you have knowledge to any degree, functional, whatever, to any degree without God?
Okay. So when babies come into the world, when they're born, babies don't reach a level of self-awareness until they're 18 months to 2 years old. When they can see themselves in a mirror, they've got a test they do where they put lipstick on the kid's face. I'm sure you're familiar with that. But it's 18 months or 2 years before a child is able to see that. But before that, they're already experiencing the world. They're already experiencing their parents, their surroundings, the dog if there's one in the family. They're experiencing that before they have any understanding of epistemology, before they have any understanding of theology itself. They are already living their lives. So if in my worldview, I presuppose the physical world and whatever that entails, whatever parts of it that I don't understand are there, I presuppose that it is a fact, that it is something that does exist. I also presuppose that I exist in it, and so do you. Now, that to me is functional. That to me is satisfactory to live my life. To just say, I'm going to accept that these things exist, They are part of reality, and they don't necessarily require justification. Just accept that they're there. That's it. And I would say that a baby does the same thing.
But here's the problem, though. You have no basis for claiming that you're in the right reality.
What do you mean the right reality?
Well, I mean, the whole brain in the vat thing. You could be a brain in a vat somewhere being fed with electrodes from something. Like, you're right now, you could be mind-controlled.
Okay, but remember what I said about my presuppositions.
Right, I realize that.
I presuppose that the physical world, whatever it entails, exists, and I exist in it.
Right, but you could be wrong about that.
No, I can't, because I'm presupposing it, in the same way that you're presupposing God.
But the thing is, you're not appealing to anything outside of your own brain in order to glean this knowledge. You're not appealing to anything outside that would have knowledge of everything. So for all you know, I mean, you presuppose that you're not a brain in a vat, but you could be.
No, I'm not presupposing that. I just said I presuppose the physical world, whatever it entails.
Right.
Whatever the true state of it is, that's what I presuppose.
Right, however...
And I presuppose that I exist in it.
Right.
And so do you.
However, you could be wrong about that.
Whatever the state of the physical world is, that's what I'm presupposing.
Right. Well, the thing is, you could have, for instance, you could be mind controlled. Would you not agree that that's a possibility? I
could be mind controlled?
Yeah.
I'm presupposing the physical world, so yes, if that is the true state of it, then that's what exists.
But the thing is, you could be right now strapped down, face down to a bed right now with electrodes feeding in your head for your entire life, and you could be imagining this conversation. This could all be an illusion for all you know. You could be imagining it. Because the thing is, this is what unbelievers tell me all the time. That I go on my perception of reality. I say, how do you know it's the right reality? And they say, I don't. But I can only deal with what I'm dealing with.
I've never heard that question before. How do you know it's the right reality?
Right, exactly. But
I don't think I understand what you mean by right reality.
Well, the thing is, the brain in the vat scenario. That could be real, according to your worldview. It's a possibility. It could be the case that up is down, down is up, and you're just being fed this information, and you're just, you're mind controlled. You would agree that it's a possibility that there is a different reality.
There's also a possibility in Russell's teapot. There's a possibility that the teapot is floating around in space, right?
But once you grant that,
too, but it's not really worth.
No. Here's the problem. Once you grant that, the only way out of that is with omniscience.
I understand.
And that's something that you can appeal to.
Right.
That being the case, you can't know anything to any degree.
That depends. Okay, when you go from certainty of knowledge to not having any knowledge, I think that is the point in the discussion when a lot of non-believers are going to not see the leap that you're making. Could you explain that, break that down, just for the sake of this discussion, going from not having certainty of absolute knowledge with omniscience to not having any knowledge at all?
This is the example. I've been working on a scenario, and I say, imagine there's a mansion with 1,000 rooms. In 999 of those rooms, the people in that room are strapped face down to a bed with electrodes feeding them impulses, feeding them their thoughts. And only in one of those rooms is the person have proper cognitive faculties, where he can actually see his surroundings, where he can know these things around. Now, the question that I come up with is, if I'm having a discussion with you, what color are the walls in your room? And you say, they're blue. I say, how do I know that? Well, my eyes are telling me this. And everybody else in the room is telling me that the walls are blue in this room. And I say, wait a minute. How do you know that you're not in a room where you're strapped face down to a bed? You're not seeing anything. And the impulses you're getting from other people are just illusory. How do you know that you're not in that room? And that's the question. So I say, if there's all these different possibilities for reality, and I ask you any question, you say, well, within my reality, this is how I make sense of it. But you have to keep in mind that you could be in that room where you're being mind controlled, and it's just gibberish what you're saying. There's no appeal outside to say the person who sees all these rooms, who can make you certain of the fact that you're not in one of those rooms. That's what the Christian appeals to. But when you say, well, I can only depend on what the cognitive faculties that I have. You could be in one of those rooms where you're strapped face down to a bed being fed thoughts in your brain. So I say, how do you know? And they say, well, I know to 0.00001% that the walls in my room are blue. Well, in order to say that, you have to tell me that you're not in that room. And now the question is, how do I know that I'm not in it? If I was in one of those rooms, I couldn't know it. The difference is, I can know that I'm not, based on revelation.
That is exactly the claim.
Right.
There.
Okay, so that's where the difference is. Well, let me go further with that. That's where the difference is. I claim that I can know that I'm not in one of those rooms by appealing to God. Now, it's my claim that it would take sheer intellectual dishonesty to say that God cannot let you know for certain that you're not in one of those rooms. That's my claim.
If God exists.
Yeah, if God exists, He could let me know for certain that I'm not in one of those rooms. So I'm saying that is the Christian's... Sorry?
So far, within your framework of what you just explained, there is no way for me or you, within that framework, to know that we are not strapped face down in the bed.
So are you saying that an all-knowing, all-powerful God could not let us know for certain that we are not in one of those rooms?
So you're talking about coherent philosophy, like you have a coherent explanation that gets you out of the room.
No. I'm saying, however God does it, He could not make us certain that we're not in one of those rooms?
If He exists.
Right, okay. So my worldview, if God exists, gives me a justification for knowing I'm not in those rooms, knowing what color the walls are in my room, knowing all these other things. Now my simple question is, what is your justification for knowing you're not in one of those rooms?
What is my... Okay. The problem here, and I just explained,
right,
within that framework, there's no way for either of us to make it out.
Well, okay, let's stop there for a minute, because you said if God exists, I can know. If you want to retract that, that's fine.
No, I don't want to.
Okay, so according to my worldview, where God exists, I can know that I'm not in one of those rooms. Whether that's the case or not, we can put on the back burner for now. According to my worldview, if God exists, I can know I'm not in one of those rooms. Is that fair?
If your worldview is true.
Right, okay.
That's the question.
Okay, so if my worldview is true, I can know that I'm not. How can you know that you're not?
It's not a relevant question within my worldview.
Okay, that's fine.
What you're asking is not something that makes any sense or matters in my worldview. That's the problem, is you've stated that you can't fathom living in a world without the biblical God. But I can.
That's right.
So it makes sense to me in a context that it doesn't make sense to you. It's a semantic issue of the difference in our worldviews, and you are just asserting that there's no worldview except your own. But I have one. So as far as I'm concerned, it's just a different viewpoint that you have. And as I've already stated, if every human being is flawed, even what you think you know, absolutely true, you could still be wrong.
But the problem
that's
is...
That's something that I can't get over.
Your problem is you're making claims about all the rooms. And I'm just asking you. Now you're saying it's an irrelevant question. It's not irrelevant to me. It's of vital importance to me.
I understand it's not irrelevant to you, but it is irrelevant to me.
That's fine. So you don't care if you're strapped face down to a bed, being fed, being mind controlled. You don't care about that. It's irrelevant to you because this is all you have. This is all you got.
I care about what's true.
Right. But the thing is, in order to know what's true, you have to appeal to omniscience.
No.
Okay, well, tell me how... No, but the thing is, what is true? You could say, in that scenario, you could be strapped face down to a bed with an electrode, face down, and you say, I care about what's true. Now, somebody who's outside of that room says, that's ridiculous. How can you even make a claim about truth when you can't tell me if you're not in that state? And now you could say, well, I don't care if I know whether I'm in that state or not. And from being outside of that state, well, that's where the conversation ends.
But it's also a claim to me that you are outside the room. Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, human beings, which I am and which you are, as I said in my worldview, I presuppose that the physical world exists. I'm in it, so are you. And I'm not perfect. Well, I have no reason to think you're perfect either. You don't claim to be perfect. So therefore, You have limitations just like I do. So
But the
for
thing
you to
is-
make a claim of being able to do something that I can't do, I need justification to believe that.
But the thing is, you have to keep in mind that you could be saying all of these things out of your mouth from within one of those rooms where you're being mind controlled. Now here's what it boils down to. You say, I can know, if my worldview is true, I can know that I'm not one of those rooms. And I say, how can you know? And you say, it's irrelevant to me. And I say, well, thank you for your time. That's where the conversation ends. Because I don't think it's irrelevant to you. Because the thing is, you will make truth claims and you will make knowledge claims. And you say, well, that's
within
all I need.
my worldview.
Right.
It's within my world. It's not within your worldview. It's a different context.
Right. However, within your worldview, even within your worldview, intellectual honesty would force you to admit that you cannot know that you're in the right reality.
If I were to apply the same standard of intellectual honesty,
Right.
then I would not be able to take your claims seriously.
That's fine. But you admitted that according to my worldview, I can know that I'm not in one of those rooms.
No, I said if your God exists.
Right. Well, according to my worldview, God exists. So according to my worldview, I can know that I'm not in one of those rooms.
Let's clear that up too, because whether or not you believe God exists doesn't make God exist. As I already
Fair.
said, if it's a different matter of claiming certainty and having
Right.
certainty.
However,
Right.
according to my worldview, if God exists, which I think is a blasphemous hypothetical because God exists and you know it. However, that aside, if God exists and He's all-knowing and all-powerful, He can make me know for certain that I'm not in one of those rooms. If my worldview is true, I can know for certain that I'm not in one of those rooms. Is that fair?
So it's just a matter now, to me, of being convinced that the biblical God is the only thing that can possibly give knowledge.
I can't convince you of
And
that.
I will be happy to accept your worldview as true. Otherwise, to me, it's unsupported.
Well, the thing is, proof does not equal
Regardless
persuasion.
of the absurdity of what you say about my worldview, it's still made from within your worldview.
But when you assume such things as truth and such things as proof, you are doing that as though you can know you're not in one of those rooms.
No, I'm not.
Okay, then what is truth in your worldview?
That
Define-
which best adheres to reality.
Okay, how do you know you're in the right reality?
What other reality do I have any justification to assume exists?
That's not what I'm asking. I'm not asking about what justification you have for knowing. I'm saying there is the possibility that there are other realities. You could be a brain in a vat.
Certainly.
Okay, how do you know that the reality, that you have your correspondence theory of truth? Truth is that which corresponds to reality on a basic
Yes.
level.
Yes.
In order to know that, you have to know that you're in the right reality. Is that not fair?
Of course it's fair.
Okay, and since you cannot know that you're in the right reality, you cannot demand truth. But you can say, I'm not persuaded of them. But you can say, I'm
not demanding anything.
No, I understand that. But you can say, I'm not persuaded of it. But to me, that's totally irrelevant. Because if you can't justify that you're not in one of those rooms, the things you're asking assume that you're not in one of those rooms. And I'm saying you have no basis for that assumption. Zero.
Okay. So then we're back to the point of functionality. What functional level, what functionality is there in assuming that I am in one of those rooms?
Well, I'm saying that even that question assumes that you're not. And that's why I say anything outside of God is absurd. From Him, through Him, and to Him are all things. So when you ask a question, you already do it on the basis that you're not in one of those rooms, because you are trying to know what you were trying to know what I said. You're trying to judge the truth of what I said. You're trying to see whether it's logical. I'm saying that when you demand all of these things, there's functionality. Any of those things borrow from a claim, from the knowledge that you're not in one of those rooms. And
Okay.
as I've demonstrated that my worldview, as you've agreed, I can know that I'm not in one of those rooms. If my worldview is true.
No, I have not. I have not.
You said if my worldview is true, I can know that I'm not in one of those rooms.
No, I didn't say that. I said that if the biblical God exists,
Right.
then you could know that.
Well, if my worldview
Whether
is
or not you
true.
believe it is irrelevant.
No, if my worldview is true, I said.
If your worldview is
True. Then I can know that I'm not in one of those rooms.
if it were true,
Right.
that's always going to be the problem.
Well-
Anytime you talk to a non-believer,
That's fine. That's fair.
If you're a non-believer, that's going to be the problem, is getting to the point of accepting that what you're saying makes any sense to us.
But I'm not trying to get you to accept it. And what I'm saying is that when I say, if my worldview is true, I can make sense of things. And you say, well, that doesn't make sense to me. I say, fine. Tell me how you can make sense of things when you can't know if you're in the right reality.
But me telling you in the conversation.
Right.
That's the problem. If you can't relate to my worldview, there's no way for me to explain it to you in a way that you're going to understand, because you have a different presupposition. That's the problem.
Yeah, but the thing is, if you cannot recognize that you have to know that you're in the right reality, that's a difficulty. And if you say, well, Sye, you cannot see that that's not a difficulty, I say, fine. Then it was nice talking with you. And, sometimes I get frustrated in the fact that people cannot see it. I cannot make you see it. And you could say the same thing about me. I grant that. But if somebody has a correspondence theory of truth is that which corresponds to reality, and I say, well, how do you know what's real? And I say, that's just irrelevant. It doesn't matter to me. This is all I have to work with. I say, well, fine, you can say that. And if that satisfies you to make claims about truth, and when you have a correspondence theory of truth, that satisfies you, that's fine. I see a great difficulty with that.
And there's one other problem here. Within your worldview, as far as you're concerned, I know that your worldview is true.
Yes.
And therefore I am operating under not just confusion, but deception.
Self-deception.
And that, I would argue that prejudices you against any other world. Based on your limitations as a human being, it prejudices you against people presenting other worldviews if you're automatically assuming that they're not correct.
Well, let me word this a different way. I know that 2 + 2 is 4. And you're saying, well, that automatically prejudices you against anybody who comes up and says 5 or 7 or 9. Yes, it does. But if it's the right answer, then it's a valid prejudice.
It's also demonstrable.
Well, I would say it's demonstrable too, by the impossibility of the contrary. That I say I can have truth and I can have knowledge according to my worldview, and then when you claim these things, you can't. It's meaningless to you. It's irrelevant to you. That's fine. But where you get to truth from there, that's what I'd like to know. And you can say, well, within my worldview, fine, but you could be strapped face down to a bed within your worldview. And if you want to say I can know true things within that, that's fine, if that's how you want to live. But I'm saying that there's an accountability for that. Because this is how I describe it to people. I say, look, I can go onto Crown land. In Canada, that's what the Crown land is, government-owned land. And I can shoot deer. I can kill them. I could clean them. I could cook them. And I can eat them. I can do all those things. Say, look, I don't have to know that somebody owns this land. I can do all these things. But the problem is somebody does own that land. And I'm saying that when you do these things, when you demand truth from the Christian, when you demand evidence, or, okay, I grant that, you're just asking these questions, but when you even ask those questions, you're doing that on Crown land. And there will be an accountability for that. That when you stand before God, you'll say, I have made myself abundantly clear to you for your entire life. You've done all these things. You've had this conversation with this, with these Christians. And that's why I say this is not just a fun philosophical argument. I realize you disagree with my worldview. But if you don't repent and put your trust in Jesus Christ, this is bad news for you. Because you've been given more truth than the next guy hasn't been. And people are judged according to the amount of truth they get and reject. And that's why I would urge you that if you plan on dying unrepentant, that you don't do these hangouts anymore. Because it won't be good for you. Because you get a lot of truth that the next person doesn't get. And I'm just saying that I'm not a hell and fire and brimstone type of person. But the thing is, I urge you to repent and put your trust in Jesus Christ. Because I would not want to be responsibility for a more severe punishment for you by explaining truth. And I understand that you don't agree, but it's something that I must voice.
So, if I'm understanding you, the real issue for you is certainty that you're not in one of those rooms.
I'm saying that if one does not start there, then one cannot make sense of any word that comes out of their mouth. Not only any word, but any thought in their heads. Because
it seems like too big of a leap.
Well, let me explain that for you.
It forgoes the functional aspect.
Well, let me explain that for you. When I say you can't make sense of one word that comes out of your mouth, when you assume that the words you're about to speak mean the same thing they did 5 seconds ago, you're depending on the inductive principle, the uniformity of nature. But you cannot make that assumption if you can't know you're not in one of those rooms.
Why not?
What's the basis for it?
We're dealing with probabilities, not absolute certainty.
Yeah, but probabilities, you're dealing with the absolute certainty of probability. The law of probability. You cannot escape it.
That's how we live our lives. If I know that I'm supposed to look each way when I cross the street, and I don't one day,
right,
and I get hit by a car, then the probability of me looking both ways before I cross the street, that has served me well and failed me when I stopped using that, relying on that probability. Right?
However,
so I have justification to live my life based on probability, and even if I don't know absolutely certain, as you claim to, that certain parts of your worldview are true, I'm still justified in living my life based on some probabilities, my personal experience.
Okay, back to the room scenario. When you say that, you could be strapped face down to a bed, being fed these thoughts, and you're saying all these things about cars and about knowing and about induction and stuff like that, when all of it could be just data that's filtered into your brain. So, of course, God has given us induction. He's given us that type of reasoning. I can make sense of that in my worldview. God who controls the universe. But if somebody cannot know that they're in the right reality, they cannot make sense of inductive reasoning. They cannot make sense of science. They cannot make sense of logic. You say, well, functionally I can. I say, but functionally you can within that room. But you don't know if that's the right room. You could be in that room where nothing makes sense.
The problem that we keep coming back to, though, is that you're not able to comprehend where we're coming from. From your worldview, we are lying, in a way. We're being deceptive. We're suppressing our sin.
Right.
So how can you understand our worldview in its context if you can only see our worldview as a distortion of your own?
Okay, but the thing is, it's not a matter of understanding your worldview. I ask a question regarding your worldview. My question is, how do you know you're not in one of those rooms? And your question to me is that that's irrelevant. And now the problem is, you're saying that I cannot understand, I cannot fathom that you are in a position where you say it's irrelevant. You're right, I can't. But your answer still is that that's irrelevant. It all comes back to the fact that if you can't know you're not in that room, anything out of your mouth is nonsensical.
Within your worldview.
Well, and again, you say you cannot know, and your definition of truth is that which corresponds to reality.
Yes.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but you're saying you cannot know what the right reality is.
We're still talking about probabilities.
Yeah, but you cannot know that you're in the right reality.
You're talking about certainty, though, right?
Well, you cannot know to any degree that you're in the right reality.
That doesn't necessarily follow from knowing something.
But you cannot know to any degree that you're in the right reality. Is that not fair?
Within your worldview, it makes sense within my worldview to have knowledge and not be 1,000% certain of it.
My question is, since truth is that which corresponds to reality, knowledge must be true. How do you know to 1% that you're in the right reality?
That depends on how you're defining knowledge.
Well, how do you define knowledge?
A justified true belief.
Okay, now you would admit that it's possible that you're not in the right reality. That what you're talking about is not the right reality, that's a fabrication.
With the caveat that the possibility is so small it's not even worth considering.
Yeah, but the thing is,
I have no reason to think that's true. Just like I have no reason to think that your worldview is true and I'm actually wrong. Now, it doesn't matter to me. Oh, hold on a second. Sean, I'll read what you wrote in just a minute. I just lost my train of thought.
It doesn't matter to you. Something along that line.
Forget it.
Mm-hmm. But
we're talking past each other because we have such differing worldviews. That's the problem. And from my perspective, when you explain your worldview in such a way that mine is absurd, I have the same position about yours.
However,
that's the problem here. We're both human beings with limitations.
But here's the difference. The difference is that you've conceded that according to my world, I can know things to be true. If my worldview is true, I can know things to be true. Now you talk about truth, but truth makes no sense in a worldview where you cannot know that you're in the right reality. It makes no sense. Now let me ask you this question. When you say that truth is that which corresponds to reality, is it important to know which is the right reality?
To which degree of certainty?
To any degree.
I have a degree of certainty.
And that's not what I'm asking. The question is, is it important to know that you're in the right reality to any degree? In order to come
within my capabilities as a human being, yes.
It is. Okay, now it is important to know that. And now when I ask you...
With the caveat, within my limitations.
Right, within your limitations, it's important to know that. Fine. Now when I ask you, how do you know you're in the right reality? You can't tell me. Now I'm showing that that is a problem with your worldview. Well, let's recap. Truth is that which corresponds to reality. I'm asking you whether it's important that you know that you're in the right reality, and you say within your limitations, yes, it is important. And then the next question is, how do you know that you're in that right reality? And that's when you answer, well, that's really an irrelevant question to me. And I think I've exposed the fact that it is relevant to you to know that you're in the right reality if truth is that which corresponds to reality.
Right, within my capacity to know as a limited human being, which you also are.
Well, the thing is, my question to you is, according to your worldview, how do you know to any degree that you're in the right reality?
I think that we're just going to end up talking in circles at this point. No?
Yeah, I think it's a valid... Is that not a valid question, though?
It is a valid question. I've already answered it.
Well, I'm sorry, I don't think you have. Because you're appealing to...
If you don't think I have, then please repeat it for me so that I can answer it.
How do you know that you're not... How do you know that you're in the right reality? And your answer always has been appealing to things within that reality.
Right.
But the thing is, that is not so. I asked, how do you know you're not face down, strapped to a bed with these electrodes in your head? And you say, well, because of the things I see, because of the walls, or because these people are telling me this, because I'm doing all these things. I say, wait a minute, those are all things that could be contained within the false reality.
Yes.
So you need something external to be able to communicate to you that you are not in a false reality.
Except, as I said earlier in our discussion, that I presuppose the physical world, however it manifests, that I exist in it, as do you.
Right. So your presupposition could be...
what is true.
Right. To you, but that's arbitrary. And it could be false.
Right. Your claims of absolute certainty coming from God through general revelation and special revelation is the same.
Well, no, the difference is you've conceded that according to my worldview, I can know that I'm not in one of those rooms. Now, everything out of your mouth assumes that you're not in one of those rooms. And you have yet to tell me how you can know that you're not in one of those rooms.
Because I can't, and I have said I don't think you can either.
Well, then you're contradicting what you've conceded.
No, I'm not.
Your question assumes truth. It assumes knowledge, it assumes logic, which cannot be made sense of in a world where you cannot know if you're in the right reality.